Beneath the golden spires of the Imperial Palace, under mountains of forgotten stone and the endless weight of millennia, there exists a place where even the Emperor's light dares not tread. They are called the Dark Cells, and they are the burden of the Shadow Keepers. The Vaults of Terra are not spoken of openly. Even among the High Lords, mention of them is fleeting, fearful. Beneath the sanctums where the Senatorum meets, deeper still than the catacombs of relics and the vaults of forbidden lore, the dark cells run like a rotten vein through the mountain's black heart. 81 levels deep, carved into the very bones of the world, they twist and spiral, seemingly without end. No one save the Adeptus Custodes knows the true depth or breadth of these cursed oubliettes, and even among them, only a few are entrusted to tread its halls. The air here is different. It clings to skin like oil, laden with a pressure that no natural atmosphere should possess. It is said that the stone itself remembers the terrors it contains, that the very walls whisper faintly with the psychic residue of ancient sins. Each step echoes strangely, lost to the endless void around it. Light struggles here. Even the radiant helms of the Custodes cannot fully dispel the oppressive dark. Instead, their glow is swallowed, leaving only muted halos bobbing like dying stars in a midnight sea. The corridors are lined with sigils burned into the rock by the Emperor's own hand, runes that pulse faintly, forming a cage of will and faith around the unspeakable prisoners entombed within. Heavy doors of black adamant, thicker than a bane blade is tall, block the way forward. Each portal is etched with the high Gothic of warning and lament, bearing names that mortal tongues were never meant to utter. What lies beyond those gates defies sane comprehension. Some cells hold relics of the dark age of technology, thinking engines that learn to hate, weapons that could unmake a sun, devices that speak across dimensions to minds beyond our galaxy. Others imprison entities, Xenos that once ruled entire star systems with nightmare power, beasts that the Emperor himself fought and could not bear to destroy. And deeper still, in the cells closest to the very molten core of Terra, lie things without name, monsters that predate humanity, sealed away at the dawn of time. The Custodians who walk these halls are unlike their gleaming brothers above. They are the Shadow Keepers, the black-shielded wardens, clad in midnight plate and armed with guardian spears etched with warding rites older than the Imperium itself. Their duty is simple but absolute, to ensure that nothing ever escapes the dark cells. Not a whisper, not a dream, not a memory. Each Shadow Keeper bears a key, crafted from the same unknown alloy as the throne's hidden mechanisms, granting access only to certain levels. No single custodian knows all the paths, all the locks. Redundancy is law. Contingency is survival. Should one fall, another stands ready. Should two falter, a third acts. Should three betray, a fourth will cleanse them all with blade and fire. The vigilance required is unrelenting. Time has no meaning in the depths. There is no sun, no bell, no changing of the watch. Only the endless, grinding pressure of duty. Custodians of the Shadow Keepers may spend decades, even centuries, without seeing the surface. They do not tire. They do not weep. They do not forget. Memory and discipline are their shield and sword alike. It was during the final years of the Unification Wars, when Terra was still a world of shattered nations and techno-barbarian kings, that the first of the Dark Cells were dug. In the aftermath of the battles for the Indonesic bloc, when the Emperor seized artifacts from vaults older than mankind's written memory, he recognized a terrible truth. Some evils could not be destroyed. Some relics of the Dark Age could not be unmade without catastrophic consequence. Thus was born the concept of containment, and thus the vaults of Rythan, the earliest Dark Cells, were hewn beneath the growing Imperial Palace. The Emperor himself oversaw the construction of the first levels. his psychic will scorching runes into every stone, his custodians standing vigil even as the rock cooled. Those earliest vaults housed horrors stripped from the fallen cities of Ursh, from the monstrous laboratories of the Pan-Pacific Empire, and from the dread tech cults of Mars before they bent the knee. Over time, the cells expanded. Each new threat, each recovered abomination demanded new depths, new locks, new guardians. During the Great Crusade, as the Emperor led his legions across the stars, the dark cells grew swollen with the plunder of 1,000 wars. Alien artifacts seized from defeated Xenos empires, corrupted relics torn from the wreckage of failed human civilizations, warp-tainted devices unearthed from dead worlds. All were brought back, sealed away in silence and secrecy. When the Horus Heresy broke the galaxy, the Shadow Keepers alone among the Custodes did not march to distant battlefields. Their duty demanded otherwise. As Terra burned, as the palace's outer walls were battered by traitorous hands, they stood their posts in the endless dark. It is said that even when the Eternity Gate itself was breached and the traitor legions poured into the inner sanctum, the dark cells remained inviolate, untouched by the hand of chaos. That is their pride, that is their curse, to stand where no victory is celebrated, no triumph sung. The Shadow Keepers do not win wars. They prevent catastrophes so great that their mere occurrence would annihilate the Imperium in an instant. Their success is measured not in glories, but in the cold, unbroken silence of the vaults. None may know what sleeps in the dark cells. That is the decree of the Emperor. That is the law of the Custodes. Even Gilliman, the returned son of the Master of Mankind, treads carefully around the subject. The risks are too great, the shadows too deep. There are prisons within prisons beneath the palace, locks upon locks, doors behind doors, each layer designed to outlast apocalypse. And still the Shadow Keepers watch, still they listen, still they guard. For as long as the Golden Throne burns, as long as Terra endures, there must always be wardens in the dark. Should they fail, there would be no second chance. Should the gates of the dark cells ever open fully, the Imperium would fall, not to war, not to treachery, but to terrors beyond the grasp of mortal fear. And so they remain, eternal, unyielding, unseen. The black shields at the heart of the palace, the sentinels of mankind's gravest sins, the Shadow Keepers. Before they were known as the Shadow Keepers, before the vaults of Terra stretched their black tendrils into the planet's heart, they were the warders of Rythan. To understand them is to peel back the layers of history, to glimpse the Imperium before it was even named, and see the burden that was placed upon golden shoulders when Terra was still half drowned in blood and superstition. The warders were not born from triumph, but from grim necessity. During the age of strife, as warp storms strangled the stars and mankind turned upon itself in endless barbarism, Terra became a shattered ruin. Yet even amid the ruins, remnants of humanity's lost mastery survived. Terrible, twisted artifacts from the dark age of technology, still humming with alien intellect, still thirsting for purpose. Weapons of unimaginable power, gene laboratories that could birth monstrosities, psi engines that whispered promises of dominion to any fool bold enough to listen. When the Emperor began his great unification, sweeping aside the petty warlords and techno-barbarian kings, he encountered these relics time and again. Entire nations had risen around the veneration of these blasphemous devices, worshipping ancient machines as gods, enslaving millions with technologies they could barely comprehend. It was not enough to destroy the kings and their armies. He had to sever the roots of corruption itself. He needed a solution not just for victory, but for eternity. Thus were the first warders of Rython chosen. Drawn from among his earliest custodians, those he had shaped most carefully, those who had already proven themselves unbreakable in will and incorruptible in soul. they were set apart. While their brothers marched to war across the battered plains and shattered citadels of old Earth, the Warders were given a darker charge. They would be the jailers of humanity's sins. The site of Rython, a blasted wasteland that had once been a jewel of the Dark Ages' scientific achievement, was chosen for the first vaults. Beneath the poisoned skies and shattered domes, the Emperor commanded the excavation of vast underground chambers. Entire mountains were hollowed out. Vaults were lined with psychic dampeners and wards beyond mortal understanding. Custodians themselves labored beside servitor thralls and warp-shielded artisans, building the prison that would outlast them all. The Warders of Rython swore an oath unlike any other given in the Emperor's service. It was a compact of silence, vigilance, and sacrifice. They would forsake the glory of conquest. They would not ride to the fanfare of planetary liberation, nor stand in triumphal procession. Instead, their victories would be invisible, their failures catastrophic. Their existence itself was to be a secret, known only to the Emperor and a chosen few. Their traditions were born in that grim cradle. Each warder learned the rites of locking and warding, rituals older than humanity itself. They memorized thousands of sigils, prayers of sealing that had to be spoken without error, lest the prisoner sense the weakness. They trained ceaselessly, honing their bodies and minds not for the battlefield's chaos, but for the meticulous demands of eternal watchfulness. A single misstep, a single lapse of attention could unleash an apocalypse. Unlike other custodians who forged personal names through valorous deeds, the Warders of Rython took new names upon their induction, names of binding and remembrance. Each name was drawn from the lexicon of Rython, a living codex etched into the black walls of the lowest vaults. To speak a Warder's name was to invoke their sacred trust. To betray it was to be cast out, name and soul alike, from the Emperor's grace. They developed their own martial forms, suited not to open war but to the close confines and desperate violence of containment breaches. The art of the binding blade, the mantle of chains, the iron watch. These were techniques designed to pin, to hold, to destroy, without allowing even a moment of enemy ascendancy. A warder was trained to fight not for victory, but for stalemate. To bind a foe so utterly that escape or resistance was impossible, no matter how terrible the entity's power. The early centuries tested the Warders in ways that no one else could understand. Some prisoners were not merely dangerous, but actively malignant in ways that defied reason. Devices that could infect dreams and spread madness like a plague. Biological horrors that evolved faster than any weapon could kill them. Artifacts that defied causality itself, twisting time and probability around themselves in parasitic loops. Against these threats, the Warders stood resolute. There are tales, preserved in fragmentary whispers among the Shadowkeepers today, of the first great crises. The Dream Coil, an ancient psi-weave that turned thoughts into reality, broke containment within the 3rd century of the Warder's vigil. The resulting nightmare almost consumed 3 levels of the vaults before the Warders sealed it away again, at the cost of nearly a 5th of their number. Yet not a whisper of that catastrophe reached the surface. The Emperor demanded, and they delivered, absolute silence. It was during these centuries that the first mark of binding was established. Each warder bore it, a black sigil etched into the flesh over their hearts, formed not by ink or brand, but by psychic inscription from the Emperor himself. The mark was both badge and bulwark. It anchored the Warders' souls against intrusion, giving them the strength to resist not just physical assaults, but psychic and existential corruption. The Warders of Rython became a brotherhood unlike any other. They trusted only each other, their camaraderie forged in the unrelenting darkness. Friendships were rare among the Custodes at large, who viewed themselves as individual avatars of the Emperor's will. But among the Warders, bonds were essential. No one could stand eternal vigil alone. No one could endure the endless pressure without brothers to bear the burden alongside them. When the Great Crusade began and the Emperor led his legions across the stars, the warders remained on Terra. The Custodes in the legions spoke of them in hushed tones, like legends or grim omens. Even the Space Marines, those towering champions of the nascent Imperium, respected the silent watchers beneath the palace. For they knew, while they fought to conquer worlds, the warders of Rythin fought to prevent something far worse from ever reaching them. Over time, as the vaults expanded, as new threats were secured and sealed away, the warders' traditions grew richer, more solemn. Rituals of reinforcement were established. Every standard Terran year, the Oath of Chains would be renewed in the deepest chamber, each warder standing in silent acknowledgement of the burdens they bore. When one of their number fell, whether to time, to battle, or rarely to the horrors within, the rite of ashes was performed, the body consumed in a flame kindled from psychic fire, their mark of binding passed to a successor. And so the warders of Rython endured. They watched while empires rose and fell. They listened to the screams of history and never once looked away. They stood as the first and last defense against terrors too vast for human minds to comprehend. They were the seeds of what would become the Shadow Keepers, the black roots beneath the golden tree of the Imperium, silent, unseen, unyielding. To stand watch for a single day is simple. To stand for a year is admirable. To stand forever, unseen, unsung, and unbroken, is to understand the true meaning of sacrifice. Such is the burden laid upon the Shadow Keepers, the inheritors of the ancient warders of Rythin, whose vigil over the dark cells is not measured in hours or decades, but in the endless march of centuries. Within the fathomless labyrinth beneath the Imperial Palace, time itself seems to warp and stagnate. Days do not pass naturally. There is no sunrise to mark a beginning, no sunset to herald an end. Instead, the passage of existence is measured by the subtle shifts of the vault's internal mechanisms. The slow sweep of anti-psychic null fields, resetting their alignments, the periodic renewal of warding sigils, the rare clank of a patrol door cycling open as a custodian passes on his appointed round. The Shadow Keepers endure it all without complaint. For them, the mind must be fortified as much as the body, lest the perpetual silence grind their sanity into dust. Their training, brutal, relentless, endless, forges an inner calm so absolute that even the whispering horrors beyond the locked gates cannot penetrate it. Meditation is not a luxury, it is a necessity for survival. Each Shadow Keeper has his own rituals to endure the monotony. Some recount the Emperor's edicts, line by line, within the confines of their mind, reciting his sacred decrees without error. Others trace invisible wards in the air with the tips of their guardian spears, reinforcing their psychic defenses with repetitive devotion. Still, others walk the same circuits through the vaults hundreds of times, memorizing every crack and seam in the stone, ensuring that no slightest alteration goes unnoticed. The armor of the Shadow Keepers is different, even among the Custodes. Black as the void, it is layered with psychic insulation, carved with runes of silence and steadfastness. Each suit is a relic in its own right, passed down across centuries, its surface pitted and scarred by 1,000 battles against entities that defy the natural laws of the universe. Their guardian spears are inscribed with kill codes, their blades anointed with rare oils to disrupt warp entities and machine spirits alike. Yet even these mighty artifacts are not enough. The greatest weapon of a Shadow Keeper is his mind, disciplined, unyielding, utterly loyal. Where others might succumb to fear, boredom, or creeping despair, the Shadow Keepers steel themselves against all inner weakness. They are their own jailers, keeping the darkness of the vaults at bay, not only with arms, but with the inviolable fortresses of their souls. Despite the grim uniformity of their duty, hierarchy persists among the Shadow Keepers. Senior Custodians, often called chain bearers, oversee the daily cycles of patrol, inspection, and ward reinforcement. These veterans have served for centuries in the depths and know every nuance of the prison's malevolent pulse. They can sense when a lock is weakening, when a psychic bleed threatens to rupture the containment fields, when the prisoners themselves grow restless. Communication among the Shadow Keepers is a thing of rare subtlety. Words are seldom spoken. Hand gestures, coded nods, and psychic impressions suffice. To speak aloud is to risk awakening something best left dreaming. Entire rotations can pass without a single voice being raised above a whisper. Every action, every thought, every moment in the dark cells is suffused with the knowledge that failure means catastrophe on a scale unimaginable. Even the slightest breach could unleash horrors capable of annihilating worlds or condemning souls to the torment of the warp. There is no tolerance for error, no forgiveness, only the relentless expectation of perfection. To falter in vigilance is to invite oblivion. There have been breaches in the long millennia of the vigil, rare, terrible events, each one a scar etched into the memory of the shield host. When containment fails, the response is immediate and absolute. Lockdown protocols seal entire sectors within seconds. Custodians converge on the breach with precision and finality, overwhelming whatever monstrosity has dared to stir with overwhelming force. There are no second chances, no retreats. Should a Shadow Keeper fall in the line of duty, his body is incinerated on the spot by his brothers, lest any fragment of corruption linger. His name is struck from the lexicon of Rythan, not out of shame, but as a mark of ultimate honor, a warrior who fulfilled his oath unto death. Once every Terran century, a ceremony of remembrance is held deep within the vaults. The rite of the shattered chain. The surviving custodians gather in the Chamber of Echoes, a vast rotunda where the names of the fallen are inscribed in runes, only visible under psychic scrutiny. There, in perfect silence, they reaffirm their oaths, binding themselves once more to the endless duty. It is a grim, holy ritual, unseen by any outside their ranks. Not all battles are fought against external threats. The vaults themselves are not inert. Psychic feedback from the imprisoned horrors generates phenomena that strain even a custodian's formidable resilience. Nightmarish hallucinations, time anomalies, bleeding walls, whispering shadows. These are the constant companions of the Watch. A custodian might spend years walking past the same empty cell door, only to glance aside one day and see it yawning open into infinite blackness. Training teaches them to trust only their mission parameters, never their senses. Every protocol is designed to impose structure against the madness. Routine is survival. Drill is life. Certainty is the shield against the unreality that seeps from the deepest vaults. When a new custodian is selected for the Shadow Keepers, a rare event, for few can withstand the psychological crucible required, he undergoes the trial of chains. This ordeal is conducted in the Vault of Waking Night, a place so saturated with psychic dread that even speaking can draw the attention of things better left unnamed. There, the aspirant must endure a full cycle, an entire Terran year, without succumbing to madness, weakness, or despair. Only then is he permitted to bear the black armor and key sigils of a Shadow Keeper. Those who survive the trial are forever changed. They move differently than their golden brethren. They speak less. Their eyes seem older, heavier, as if they have seen through the veil of reality and glimpsed the horrors beyond. In truth, they have, and they have not flinched. Among the Shadow Keepers, valor is not a matter of grand deeds or heroic stands. It is the simple, grinding perseverance of remaining unbroken against the weight of the impossible. Every day they endure is a victory for the Imperium. Every night they survive is another day that the darkness remains chained beneath the palace. It is said that if you stand in the deepest vaults long enough, you can hear the pulse of Terra itself, a slow, thunderous beat like the heart of a dying god. Whether it is the Emperor's will, the throes of the imprisoned horrors, or simply the world weeping beneath its burdens, none can say. But the Shadow Keepers listen, and they endure. And as long as they stand their vigil, the horrors stay locked away, and humanity endures in ignorance and safety. This is the eternal vigil. There are prisons within the dark cells whose gates are never touched, whose names are never spoken, whose very existence is denied even among the highest echelons of Terra. For it is not merely mortal threats that the Shadow Keepers guard. Beneath the throne world, in the Stygian abyss, lie the true terrors of old night, remnants of an age when humanity reached for godhood and plummeted into ruin. Long before the Imperium, before the collapse of the age of technology, mankind spanned the stars in glorious arrogance. They bent the fabric of reality to their will. They forged living machines, tamed genetic titans, and crafted devices capable of rewriting the laws of nature itself. But hubris invited catastrophe. When the warp storms came, when the galaxy turned against them, humanity's own creations became its executioners. Some were destroyed in the final wars of old night. Some were lost in the tides of the warp. But a precious, accursed few survived, scattered, broken, waiting. And it is these things that the Shadow Keepers guard. Not enemies in the traditional sense, but sins given form, nightmares made flesh and iron, bound now in the silent oubliettes of Terra. One such terror is known only by the codename the Slithering Dreamer. Recovered during the Unification Wars from the ruins of the Indonesic bloc, this creature defied any conventional taxonomy. Neither wholly biological nor wholly psychic, the Dreamer existed as a semi-corporeal presence, capable of infiltrating the thoughts of any being in proximity and reshaping their desires into grotesque living forms. Victims would mutate within minutes, their flesh sculpted into nightmarish parodies of human ambition. A scholar transformed into a thing of endless tongues, seeking forbidden truths. A warrior twisted into a mindless engine of endless slaughter. The Dreamer could not be slain by blade or bolter. It was only through the combined efforts of the Custodians and the nascent Sisters of Silence, wielding relics scavenged from the Black Wastes, that it was finally subdued. Bound in psycho-reactive chains and sealed in an adamantine sarcophagus, the Dreamer now lies entombed in Vault 31, where the psychic wards are renewed every 100 days without fail. Should even a single rune fail, the dream might slither free once more. Yet the Dreamer is but one among many. Another prisoner, older and more terrible, is the entity called the Eater of Gods. It was unearthed in the catacombs beneath Ursh, after the Emperor broke that war-mad empire beneath his golden heel. Those who gazed upon it saw only a shifting mass of iron and bone, pulsing with a heartbeat that did not match any living thing. Analysis revealed it to be a war construct, a weapon from the long-forgotten wars between mankind and the abominable intelligences that once ruled the stars. But the Eater of Gods was more than machine. It carried a fractured consciousness, something hungry, something endlessly replicating. Legends say that in the final days of Ursh, the Eater consumed entire armies, flesh, soul, and spirit alike, reducing proud generals to gibbering biomass, their existence overwritten by the engine's monstrous will. The Shadow Keepers do not attempt to study it, they merely maintain its prison, a suspended nullfield chamber nested within Vault 17, kept isolated by layers of void shields and psychic anathemas. Custodians posted to its level are rotated every 20 days, even by the standards of the eternal vigil. So corrosive is the Eater's ambient presence that even a custodian's mind can begin to fray under its unseen influence. Some threats imprisoned below Terra are not creatures, but devices, relics crafted by ancient human hands with purposes so blasphemous that even describing them courts madness. One such device is catalogued simply as Object 04-A, the sevenfold trimiasma. It appears to be a crystalline lattice, roughly the size of a human skull, carved into interlocking recursive geometries. To the untrained eye, it is a beautiful relic, shimmering with internal light. To the wise, it is an artifact of ultimate dread. The sevenfold trimiasma does not kill directly. Instead, it unravels causality. Wherever it is taken, coincidence and probability twist into lethal patterns. A leader's most trusted advisors turn traitor without cause. A city's defenses crumble at the precise moment of invasion. A son strikes down his father for imagined slights. Entropy accelerates. Trust rots. Entire civilizations collapse into anarchy, undone not by invasion but by invisible treachery, seeded by the trimiasma's malignant presence. It is believed that the device was once used as a weapon of subjugation by ancient technoclades, a method of toppling star empires without ever firing a shot. It now rests within a stasis vault, surrounded by probability-dampening fields, under watch more constant than almost any other relic in the dark cells. Even the Custodes treat its presence with profound unease, and many whisper that merely glimpsing it too long can doom a soul to quiet, inevitable betrayal. Yet, for all the horrors that technology birthed, none are more feared among the Shadow Keepers than the ancient prisoners whose existence predates human memory itself, the so-called nameless things. There are vaults deeper than any standard chart records, older than the palace itself, sealed by methods forgotten by all but the most senior among the Custodes. These cells contain beings, if they can be called beings, that were ancient when the first human ancestors lifted stones as weapons. Their names are unknown, their motives unknowable. They exist outside of linear time, outside of comprehensible physics. Some are glimpsed only when containment fails momentarily. A crack in the vault seals, a whisper in the psychic noosphere, a flicker of impossible movement caught by automated scryers. One custodian, veteran warden Ethan Keelis, once stood a single rotation outside Vault 01 during a containment event. He emerged changed. His armor bore no mark and his body remained uninjured, but his eyes saw things no mortal mind was built to endure. He spoke only once before requesting the right of final sealing, a sacred execution reserved for those whose souls have been fatally compromised. "It looks back," was all he said. The Shadow Keepers do not question. They do not seek to understand these prisoners. Knowledge is peril. Curiosity is death. Their purpose is simple, terrible, absolute: containment. When the Great Rift tore open the galaxy, it is whispered that some of the terrors grew restless. Seals weakened, locks trembled under the psychic screams of a wounded galaxy. Entire squads of custodians were lost, reinforcing the wards. None speak of those battles, none sing songs of those victories, for there can be no victory against the terrors of old night, only temporary triumphs, fleeting respites in an endless war against entropy and madness. These horrors remain, even now, far below the throne. They dream, they wait, they yearn for the day the vaults crack, and Terra once again faces the judgment of its forgotten sins. But the Shadow Keepers remain also, silent, tireless, unbreakable. For so long as a single black-armored custodian stands in defiance, the terrors will know only imprisonment, and humanity will be spared the terrible price of its forgotten past. It is a rare and terrible thing for the Shadow Keepers to abandon the vaults. Their duty to the dark cells is absolute, their oaths binding even unto death. Yet history records one moment, one black chapter in the annals of the Imperium, when even the eternal jailers were summoned to the battlefield. It was a summons they could not refuse. It was the burning of Prospero. The world of Prospero was a jewel of psychic brilliance, a beacon of forbidden knowledge. Its rulers, the Thousand Sons Legion under Magnus the Red, delved deeply into the mysteries of the immaterium, wielding power that could shape reality itself. For a time they were tolerated, even admired. But the Emperor, in his infinite wisdom, foresaw the inevitable doom such unchecked sorcery would bring. His command was clear. Prospero must be purged. When the order was given, it was not only the Space Wolves who answered the call. In the deep halls of the Imperial Palace, a conclave was summoned in secret. The Master of Mankind spoke in hushed tones to his most trusted custodians. Among those assembled were the ancient warders of Rythen, the ancestors of the Shadow Keepers, clad in their blackened plate, their helms masked and unspeaking. He did not command them. He did not plead. He merely asked a question. Will you stand sentinel against a greater darkness? The warders understood without further explanation. If Prospero's secrets bled unchecked into the galaxy, no vault, no chain, no ward would be strong enough to contain the consequences. Sorcery, left untethered, was a cancer that would consume not just Prospero, but Terra itself. Thus, with heavy hearts and grim resolve, a detachment of the warders departed from the dark cells for the first time in living memory. It was a silent procession, witnessed by none save a handful of solemn scribes. The vaults were not left undefended. A skeleton watch remained, bolstered by desperate contingencies. But the departure was a risk, unlike any the Shadow Keepers had ever taken. They wagered the safety of humanity against the necessity of war. They joined the censure host, a force of space marines, Sisters of Silence, and custodians tasked with bringing Prospero to heel. Yet while the Legio Custodes, in gleaming gold, marched openly alongside the Wolves of Russ, the black-shielded warders remained hidden in the shadow of the advance, a blade sheathed until the precise moment of need. The journey to Prospero was a trial unto itself. The storms of the warp howled with unnatural fury, as if some unseen force sought to thwart their passage. Psychic interference plagued the fleets, causing instruments to fail and navigators to scream in their sleep. Some whispered that Magnus, with all his prescient might, sensed their coming and sought to delay the inevitable. Yet the custodians endured. They pressed onward through madness and fire until at last the pale red sun of Prospero rose before them. The assault was swift and merciless. The Space Wolves, baying for blood, descended upon the shimmering towers of Tisca like wolves upon lambs. Fire and bolter shell rained from the heavens. Titans strode the streets, their god engines reducing monuments of art and learning to rubble. Against them stood the Thousand Sons, sorcerers whose psychic might could shatter mountains and reshape armies with a thought. The battle raged in the open, where mortals could witness and record. But in the hidden places, the vaults beneath Tisca, the sealed libraries, the secret sanctuaries, another war was waged, unseen and unspoken. It was here that the warders of Rythen made their stand. Their mission was not conquest, it was containment. With silent efficiency, they infiltrated the labyrinthine catacombs beneath the city, seeking out relics and artifacts that defied natural law. They moved with deadly purpose, extinguishing sorcerers who guarded forbidden knowledge, severing the lines of power that fed the great libraries. Each encounter was brutal, swift, final. No mercy was shown. No quarter given. In the deepest crypts, they found horrors that even the Thousand Sons dared not unleash. caged warp beasts bred for conquest, shards of entities that should not exist within the materium, devices crafted from the flensed thoughts of enslaved psychers, their designs pulsing with malevolent purpose. The warders sealed these things in psycho-reactive sarcophagi, binding them with chains of nullite and adamant. Where containment proved impossible, they destroyed utterly, burning knowledge and artifact alike in searing fields of anti-psionic energy. Better to consign precious lore to oblivion than allow it to taint the stars. In one chamber, deep beneath the pyramid of Photep, they confronted a creature born of Magnus's own experiments, a being of raw warp stuff, barely contained in a lattice of psychomagnetic fields. It pulsed and writhed, sensing their approach. The Shadowkeepers acted without hesitation. 3 custodians gave their lives to shatter the containment field inwards, collapsing the thing into a singularity of null space before it could escape. Above, the battle reached its fevered pitch. The psychic backlash of Magnus's defiance sundered the heavens, and the full horror of the Thousand Suns' corruption was laid bare. Even as Tiska burned, the warders continued their grim harvest, dragging every shard of forbidden lore, every scrap of dark potential, back into containment. When the battle ended, when the city lay in ruins and the surviving Thousand Suns fled into exile, the warders withdrew as silently as they had come. They bore with them sealed reliquaries, containers etched with layers of ciphered warnings, relics that would never see the light of day again. Not even the space wolves, triumphant and bloodied, knew the full extent of what had been taken. Their return to Terra was somber. They did not march in triumph. They did not speak of what they had seen. In the black depths of the dark cells, new vaults were carved to contain the relics of Prospero. Vaults deeper, darker, more heavily warded than any before. The price had been high. Custodians lost, relics destroyed, secrets forever consigned to oblivion. Yet the greater catastrophe, the unchaining of sorcery across the Imperium, had been averted. Humanity would endure for a time longer. To this day, the Shadowkeepers bear the scars of Prospero. Some among them whisper of visions glimpsed in the ruins, of fates darker even than what was sealed away. They speak little of it. Their duty is not to remember, but to endure, to watch, to guard. The burning of Prospero was not merely the end of a world, it was the reaffirmation of a sacred truth. That knowledge, unbound by restraint, is as great a threat to humanity as any alien or demon. And that in the darkness beneath the throne, there must always be those who stand ready to extinguish such fires, no matter the cost. The Shadowkeepers stood then. They stand still. They will stand forever. It is said that the greatest threats to the Imperium do not always come with banners unfurled and war horns sounding. Some creep silently from the void, unseen until it is almost too late. Such was the case with the ominous gift, a nightmare adrift among the stars, and a terror that only the Shadowkeepers could truly comprehend. It began, as these things often do, with a whisper. Long-range auger probes stationed at the edge of Sol's system detected an anomaly. A vast mass, larger than any known battleship, adrift in the outer dark. At first, it appeared to be a derelict space hulk, one of countless such wrecks that drift through the tides of the warp. Ancient vessels fused together by gravity and madness, drifting eternally between real space and nightmare. But this one was different. The data that returned was fragmented, corrupted, as if the very act of scanning the anomaly provoked it. Vox operators suffered seizures. Machine spirits recoiled, refusing to obey. In the astropathic choir, 2 souls tore themselves apart rather than describe what they had glimpsed. Across the Emperor's tarot, the same card emerged again and again, inverted and burning. The tower. Collapse. Doom. The High Lords debated in panic. The Imperial Navy argued for orbital bombardment. The Inquisition clamored for immediate quarantine and study. But in the heart of the Imperial Palace, the Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes, Isoth Kumadra, understood a deeper truth. Some threats are too vile even to risk study. Some relics must not merely be denied to the enemy, they must be obliterated beyond memory. And so the Captain General summoned the Shadow Keepers. The Lockwarden at that time, a grim custodian known only by the name Drekal Vane, accepted the burden without question. He gathered a cohort of 200 of his finest, veterans who had stood watch over the darkest vaults, who had faced horrors unrecorded in any chronicle, and prevailed. Their mission was clear. They would board the derelict. They would purge it. They would ensure that nothing, no artifact, no echo, no whisper, survived. The ominous gift, as it had come to be called by those too afraid to speak plainly, lurked beyond the orbit of Pluto, drifting lazily in the emptiness like a spider in the web of reality itself. As the Custodes' assault craft approached, augurs failed entirely, auspexes turned to static. Vox traffic was silenced, not by jamming, but by the absence of transmission itself, as if the very fabric of reality frayed in proximity to the hulk. Still, the Shadow Keepers pressed onward. They breached the hull with precision, cutting through blackened, half-melted adamantium to enter the corpse of the vessel. Inside, they found a labyrinth of madness. The hulk was no simple collision of lost ships. It was an abomination of purpose. Human vessels, ancient colony ships, military frigates, even wrecked Mechanicus arc vaults had been fused together not by the random forces of the warp, but by deliberate, malevolent design. Walkways twisted in impossible angles, hallways ended in screaming maws of flesh and metal. Throne rooms built for planetary governors now housed spires of pulsating, living bone. And worse still were the echoes. In the corridors, the Custodians heard voices, not in their ears, but in the deep places of their minds. Pleas for help, cries of agony, whispers of treachery. Every step deeper into the hulk chipped away at the armor of the soul, testing even the iron will of the Emperor's chosen. Some Custodians faltered. One veteran knight, Serain Vos, removed his helm mid-mission, weeping openly as he tried to embrace an unseen figure from his past. His brothers slew him without hesitation, honoring him with the mercy he could no longer grant himself. The further they pressed, the clearer the shape of the threat became. At the heart of the ominous gift was not a simple relic or demonic infestation. It was a construct, a shrine built from the bones of dead civilizations, wired into the carcasses of ancient void ships, designed to act as a beacon. A signal flare to the warp, a call to entities far beyond mortal comprehension. The structure throbbed with nascent life, its existence an open wound in the membrane of reality. Already the ship began to shift and warp, tendrils of unreality coiling outward into space. Had it been allowed to reach the Sol system proper, Terra itself would have been engulfed in a tide of madness before the Golden Throne could even react. There was no time for retreat. Lockwarden Drekal Vane ordered the activation of Protocol Terminus, a code so ancient and terrible that even most Custodians only know it by rumor. The Shadow Keepers set charges throughout the hulk, relic devices that burned with anti-warp sigils and blacklight radiation. They sang no hymns, spoke no prayers. Duty was prayer enough. The Lockwarden himself led the final charge to the heart of the beacon. There, upon an altar of screaming metal, he planted the Emperor's Bane, a singularity grenade crafted in the darkest vaults beneath Terra, a weapon reserved for threats so profound that no lesser tool would suffice. As the device activated, reality began to collapse inward. The hulk buckled and groaned, pulled into a screaming black wound in the fabric of space. Custodians fought their way back to the assault craft, dragging wounded brothers through corridors that no longer obeyed the laws of physics. Not all made it. Of the 200 who boarded the ominous gift, fewer than 90 returned. When the Hulk imploded, it did so without fanfare. One moment it was a wound upon existence. The next, it was gone. Erased from real space, its corruption devoured by forces too ancient for mortal comprehension. The returning Custodians were not celebrated. There were no banners raised, no victories sung. Instead, they returned to the vaults of Terra in silence. Those who survived bore scars deeper than flesh, wounds upon the soul, cracks in the perfect armor of their minds. Loch Warden Drekal Vaughn was among the dead, consumed in the singularity he unleashed. His name is etched upon the hidden wall of chains, honored by his brothers but unknown to the galaxy he saved. And the ominous gift passed into legend, a name spoken only in the deepest halls, a cautionary tale for those who believe that all threats can be confronted openly. The Shadow Keepers know better. They know that some horrors must be erased utterly, without witness or memory, that the cost of survival is silence, that the greatest victories are those no one will ever know. Thus did the Shadow Keepers fulfill their oath once more. Thus did they save mankind from a doom it never even glimpsed. For 10,000 years, the throne of Terra burned with constant withering light, and beneath its shadow, the Imperium endured. But light, even the Emperor's light, casts shadows, and in the final centuries of the 41st millennium, those shadows deepened into madness. The High Lords spoke of strength, of stability, of unbroken tradition. Yet within the great hallowed halls of the Imperial Palace, cracks had begun to spiderweb unseen. Cracks not merely in stone or steel, but in spirit. And nowhere were those fractures more lethal than in the silent depths, in the vaults guarded by the Shadow Keepers. It began with whispers. Pilgrims arrived by the billions, as they had for millennia, drawn by the promise of proximity to the master of mankind. They filled the echoing cathedrals, the endless shrines, the sprawling cities that had over centuries fused into one unbroken mass around the palace. They brought prayer and desperation. But they brought something else too, doubt. There were rumors among the common folk. Rumors that the Emperor no longer stirred upon the golden throne, that his soul had flickered, that Terra was vulnerable. Faith, once absolute, began to mutate. Cultic movements sprang up in the shadows, not the open heresies that the Inquisition could crush with fire and blade, but subtler blasphemies, doctrines that claimed Terra must be tested, that the Emperor's silence was a call for action, that humanity must prepare for his death, or hasten it to achieve rebirth. Most of these were little more than desperate nonsense, harmless in their feebleness. But some found their way deeper. Some reached into the very institutions sworn to defend him. In the dark cells, the change was first felt as a prickling on the edge of perception. Servitors, once utterly obedient, began to falter. Maintenance drones deviated from prescribed routes. Logic engines produced calculations marred by irrational variables. The vaults themselves seemed to thrum with uneasy tension, as if some hidden pressure was building, unseen but relentless. The Shadow Keepers responded as they always had, with vigilance, precision, and silence. Patrol schedules were doubled, psychic wards were reinforced, ritual cleansings of the soul became more frequent, more brutal. Yet even their superhuman vigilance was not enough to entirely hold back the tide. The first true breach came not from without, but from within. A dark cell door, one sealed since before the end of the Horus Heresy, was found ajar. Only slightly, only by the barest crack, but enough that the stasis fields inside had degraded. Within, a relic of unimaginable malignance, the Echo Locus, stirred from its long dormancy. The Echo Locus was no beast of flesh, no demon in obvious form. It was a frequency, a self-sustaining psychic signal, woven into a crystalline lattice of unknown origin. It had no voice, no mind. It simply was. And its presence infected the minds of men like a slow, insidious disease. 3 Shadow Keepers were found in the vault corridors, kneeling motionless, weapons discarded, heads bowed as if in prayer. When approached, they rose in perfect unison and attacked their brothers, fighting with a coordination that defied even custodian reflexes. It took the combined might of 2 squads to bring them down. Their bodies were incinerated, their names struck from the rolls, their armor melted and buried under unmarked shrines deep beneath the palace. The Echolocus was resealed at a terrible cost, and the protocols guarding the vaults were rewritten overnight. But that was only the beginning. Across Terra, the underbellies of the palace swarmed with unease. Maintenance crews went missing. Adeptus Administratum functionaries reported mass data loss in archival vaults. Entire pilgrim districts vanished into lockdown without explanation. Beneath the great spires, darker cults festered, cults that did not seek merely to worship, but to awaken. They spoke of the true light beyond the throne, and they trafficked in artifacts, forbidden knowledge, and the whispers of demons. The Shadow Keepers, forbidden to leave the vaults for open war, responded in their own way. Strike teams were formed, small surgical kill squads clad in black, moving through the maintenance tunnels and dead zones like wraiths. No declarations were made, no proclamations were issued. They hunted. When they found nests of heresy, they struck with clinical precision. No prisoners were taken, no trials held. Every cultist, every conspirator was burned to ash by weapons designed for the annihilation of warp entities. Even the bones were ground to dust. Some say that the screams of the purged can still be heard echoing through the palace's forgotten arteries. Yet for all their efforts, the Shadow Keepers knew they were losing ground. The psychic saturation of Terra grew worse by the year. The burden on the Golden Throne increased, its demands sapping the strength of even the Emperor's mightiest servants. The walls between reality and the warp thinned, not with a roar, but with a slow, corrosive seepage. One year, the year of falling stars, saw dozens of minor psychers across the palace experience spontaneous combustion. Another year brought the mass dreaming, where thousands of pilgrims collapsed simultaneously, screaming visions of golden rivers running red with blood. Throughout it all, the Shadow Keepers maintained their vigil. They adapted their rituals, devised new containment fields, implemented harsher training regimens. They made no complaints. They asked for no aid. Their greatest fear was not invasion. It was corruption. If the vaults themselves were compromised from within, if the dark cells fell prey to the rot infecting Terra's soul, the consequences would be beyond imagining. And so the Loquidin of the time, Sarthan Vilas, called the Black Anchor, issued the Edict of Severance. All non-custodian personnel were purged from the dark cell's periphery. All servitors were deactivated and incinerated. All cogitator systems were severed from broader palace networks. The vaults became an island unto themselves, cut off from the creeping madness above. Even communication with the Captain General was reduced to the barest minimum, transmitted via encrypted hardlines under layers of psychic shielding. The Shadow Keepers turned inward, becoming even more isolated, even more secretive. Some among the wider Adeptus Custodes wondered if they had fallen into despair, if they had become as lost as the prisoners they guarded. But those few who glimpsed the watchers of the dark cells during those black years knew otherwise. Their armor was blacker, their eyes sharper, their resolve colder and harder than ever before. They had seen the storm coming. They had tasted its bitterness, and they had steeled themselves to endure it. Thus, when the Great Rift tore open the galaxy and plunged Terra into its darkest hour, the Shadow Keepers were already prepared. They had fought madness in silence. They had hunted corruption in secret. They had become weapons honed not against armies or traitor legions, but against the slow, insidious decay of hope itself. In the years of madness, the Imperium trembled, faith faltered, heroes fell, but the vaults of terror remained sealed, the chains held, and in the darkness beneath the Emperor's throne, the Shadow Keepers stood their eternal vigil, grim, silent, and unbroken. When the sky itself split and the cicatrix maledictum bled across the stars, Terra, the cradle of mankind, the throne of the Emperor, found itself, at last, besieged once more. It was not the traitor legions this time, nor the heretic warlords of the scattered galaxy. It was something far older, purer. It was war in its most primal form, the fury of the warp made flesh. And at the heart of that fury, the Lion's Gate stood alone. In the days before the storm broke, the Lion's Gate spaceport had been a monument to humanity's triumphs. It was the main artery through which Imperial might flow to the stars, the vast landing fields where the Emperor's hosts had once assembled to conquer the galaxy. Its towering bastions and fortified walls were thought unassailable, the great landing pads so immense that even the largest void ships could rest upon them like birds upon a roost. But when the rift opened, when the galaxy itself screamed in agony, the Lion's Gate became a target. The demonic hosts of Khorne, blood-mad and numberless, tore free from the immaterium and poured down upon Terra's defenses. World engines groaned, titans shook. The palace itself trembled. Across the broken stars, reinforcements faltered and vanished. Warp storms cut Terra off from the greater Imperium. There would be no aid. Only those already upon Holy Terra would stand against the tide. The Captain General, Trajan Valoris, marshaled the Legio Custodes. Sisters of Silence, silent and grim, drew their blades. The Imperial Fists, scattered remnants and inheritors of Rogel Dorn's legacy, took their places along the bulwarks. And in the dim, sealed vaults of the Imperial dungeon, the Shadow Keepers faced an impossible decision. The Lock Warden of that dark time was Borsa Thirsk, a giant even among Custodians, whose black armor bore the burnished scars of 1,000 battles fought in silence. His duty, above all else, was to the dark cells. No command from the High Lords could order their abandonment. No decree, not even from the Master of Mankind himself, could unbind their oaths. Yet the reality could not be denied. If the Lion's Gate fell, Terra would burn. And with it, the dark cells would be rendered meaningless, overrun, plundered, or simply consumed by the roiling madness of the warp. Thus, in what some later called an act of heresy, and others, a greater form of loyalty, Lockwarden Thirsk made his choice. He would divide the watch. A third of the Shadow Keepers would remain, entrenched deeper than ever before, locking the vaults with fail-safes and dead-man mechanisms. These Custodians would hold the dark cells or die within them. No reinforcement would come, no retreat permitted. The rest Thirsk led personally to the surface. Clad in their blackened armor, faceless behind ornate helms, the Shadow Keepers marched into the light of battle for the first time since Prospero's burning. They moved like a storm of living iron, silent even as Terra itself howled. They took their place along the inner ramparts of the Lion's Gate, not as conquerors or saviors, but as executioners. The first wave struck like a tidal force of blood and iron. Demons by the thousands surged forward, howling praises to Khorne, their blades wet with the ichor of countless mortal victims. Flesh hounds tore across the killing fields, scenting the fear of mortal defenders. Bloodthirsters, towering monsters of hate incarnate, led the charge, each a god unto itself. The Custodes met them with spear and shield and storm. But it was the Shadow Keepers who turned the tide where it was thickest. Wielding relics forbidden even among the broader ranks of the Adeptus Custodes, They shattered demonic constructs with graviton mauls and null-field projectors. They tore down bloodthirsters with the ritual blades of binding, weapons forged not for mere killing, but for annihilation of spirit and soul alike. The Sisters of Silence fought at their side, their psychic null fields cutting deep wounds into the fabric of the warp-spawned horrors, blunting the demon's raw fury. Where a sister fought beside a shadow keeper, reality itself seemed to harden, as if Terra's ancient spirit, battered but unbroken, rose up to defy the madness. Hours stretched into days, days into an endless blur of violence. Again and again the walls shook. Again and again breaches were forced and held by blood and will. At one point, a greater demon of Khorne, so vast that its wings blotted out the dying light of soul itself, breached the third inner gate. It smashed through the defenders with contemptuous ease, its axe carving trenches of blood and fire through the ranks. It was Lockwarden Thirsk who stood against it. With a wordless roar, he met the beast in single combat, his guardian spear a blur of sanctified gold and blackened steel. For an hour they fought, their blows shattering stone, melting ceramite, warping the very air with their violence. When the demon finally fell, skewered and dragged screaming back into the immaterium, Thirsk himself was left standing, barely, his armor shattered, his blood soaking the hallowed ground. He did not leave the line. None of the Shadow Keepers did, for they knew the stakes. They knew that to fall was to invite something worse than death, to allow the horrors they guarded to be unleashed into a world already aflame. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm began to abate. Reinforcements from Guilliman's Indomitus crusade, thought lost, broke through the warp storms in the nick of time. The Primarch himself returned to Terra, his forces crushing the remaining demonic incursions and securing the battered world. The Lion's Gate held, barely. The ground before it was a charnel pit of broken bodies, shattered armor, and still smoking relics. Blood seeped into the bedrock. The air stank of ozone, burnt flesh, and lingering hatred. Among the ruins, the Shadow Keepers gathered their wounded. They made no speeches. They sang no hymns. They simply turned and marched back into the dark. Back to the vaults, back to the silence. Only later, much later, would the records be amended to include their contribution. Even then, most within the Adeptus Terra would only find a single cryptic notation. Auxiliary Custodian Forces, unknown designation, present at Lion's Gate, accounted for. But the Shadow Keepers needed no recognition. They had fulfilled their duty, protecting Terra not just from the enemy without, but from the greater catastrophe that would have followed. They had fought, they had bled, they had endured, and beneath the Emperor's dying light, they resumed their eternal vigil. The sky was broken, and no hand, no fortress, no oath could mend it. When the Cicatrix Maledictum tore through the galaxy, it did not come with warning nor mercy. It did not arrive like a storm that could be seen on the horizon, rolling in with time enough to prepare. It came as a convulsion, a sundering of the very fabric of reality, a shuddering scream of the universe itself that no mortal mind could fully endure. Even on Terra, even within the hallowed walls of the palace itself, the shock was felt. The walls shook, not from bombardment, but from a pressure more profound, the pressure of unreality bleeding into real space, a tide of nightmare forcing its way through cracks, thought eternally sealed. And in the vaults below, where the darkest secrets of humanity had long been imprisoned, the consequences were immediate and catastrophic. The dark cells had been designed to endure all things: wars, invasions, the collapse of civilization itself. They had been forged in the crucible of the Emperor's will, reinforced across 10,000 years of vigilance. Yet, they had never been tested against the breaking of the universe itself. At the first spasms of the rift, the deepest vaults trembled. Psycho-reactive wards thought immutable flickered. Null fields collapsed into silence. Containment protocols, redundantly layered across hundreds of iterations, failed simultaneously as causality itself twisted in upon itself. In an instant, several dark cells stood empty. The prisoners, relics, entities, horrors too terrible for the light, were gone. Some evaporated as reality shifted, pulled screaming into the warp. Others, worse, slipped into the cracks between worlds, their location and condition now unknown. Some may yet walk the shattered voids of the Imperium Nihilus. Others may never be found again. The Shadow Keepers, those eternal wardens, face the greatest crisis in their long and secret history. Their creed, their identity, had always been to hold the vaults inviolate, to guard Terra's darkest secrets so that none might escape. But now the impossible had occurred. Containment had failed. For a time, despair threatened even these mighty warriors. Lock Warden Borsa Thirsk, recently returned from the blood-soaked fields of the Lion's Gate, stood in grim silence before the wall of chains, contemplating the burden of their failure. His brothers looked to him for guidance. What would it mean if the vaults could no longer be trusted to endure? What would it mean if the horrors they once caged now roamed free across a shattered galaxy? It was Thirsk who made the fateful decision. The mission of the Shadow Keepers would change. They would not merely stand vigil. They would hunt. Within the heart of the vaults, a new order was given. The Watch Unbound. Strike forces of Shadow Keepers, formed of the most relentless and incorruptible among their number, would depart Terra's sacred soil for the first time in millennia. They would go forth into the broken galaxy. They would seek the escaped prisoners, the lost relics, the abominations loosed by the Great Rift. They would recover them or destroy them utterly. No banners were raised, no grand pronouncements made. This new war was one of silence, waged in the dark between stars. The first deployments were swift and brutal. Upon the shrine world of Gethsemane Prime, a ritual automaton escaped the vaults, found new worshippers among the fallen ecclesiarchy. It grew, absorbing the prayers of the desperate into a writhing mass of psychic metal. When the Shadow Keepers arrived, they did not negotiate. They did not explain. They carved a path through the corrupted faithful and destroyed the machine in a storm of null fire, leaving the ruins to burn without a single word spoken. On the death moon of Valitor, something older and crueler than the worst demons slithered into the dreams of a broken PDF garrison. Men turned on each other, forming cults dedicated not to gods of the warp, but to alien intelligences predating humanity itself. Shadowkeeper squads, armed with psi-binders and null cages, descended upon the moon in surgical strikes, erasing the infection with clinical detachment. When they departed, there was no one left alive but bones and dust. Every world they touched became a graveyard. There was no triumph, no liberation, only the ruthless excision of contagion. The wider Imperium took note. To most Imperial commanders, the Shadow Keepers were a mystery within a mystery, black-armored custodes who appeared without warning, wrought slaughter, and vanished without explanation. To Inquisitors and Cardinals alike, they were a terror, untouchable, unquestionable, and utterly beyond mortal jurisdiction. But there were whispers even among the Custodians. Some said that in their long years in the dark cells, the Shadow Keepers had become something other than mere warriors, that they had stared too long into the abyss, that their humanity, such as it had ever existed, had been burned away, leaving only purpose, that they could no longer distinguish between necessary sacrifice and needless slaughter. The truth was more terrible still. The Great Rift had changed not just the galaxy, it had changed the very nature of vigilance. The vaults were no longer enough. The chains of the past could not bind the future. The Shadowkeepers understood now that evil could not merely be imprisoned and forgotten. It could not merely be contained. It had to be hunted, relentlessly, eternally, across a galaxy that no longer obeyed the Emperor's order. They had become predators. And in so doing, they had become something new. Not just jailers, not just guardians, but reapers. They spoke little of these changes. To their brothers among the Legio Custodes, they remained aloof, distant, inscrutable. They returned to Terra between deployments only long enough to offload recovered artifacts into newly carved vaults, deeper, darker than before, and to prepare for the next hunt. The dark cells still existed, but now they were mere staging grounds. The galaxy itself had become the prison, and the Shadowkeepers would never again be content to stand idle. Thus began the Great Hunt, a silent war waged across two halves of a sundered galaxy. A war without banners, without songs, without end. The rift would widen, chaos would deepen, worlds would fall, but for every horror loosed into the stars, a shadow followed. A black-armored sentinel with eyes like burning coals, bearing the Emperor's unseen wrath into the broken dark. For the chains must be reforged, and the hunt would never end. In the wake of the Great Rift's birth, as the Imperium Nihilus drowned in madness and Terra licked its wounds from the demon siege, a call echoed across the broken stars, a call for fortresses to be raised anew. And none was greater, none more sacred than the Phalanx. The Phalanx, the mobile star fortress of the Imperial Fists, was more than a weapon. It was a relic of the Golden Age, a bastion of humanity's greatest triumphs, a testament to unbreakable will. Crafted long before the coming of the Emperor, it had been wrested from the void by Rogel Dorn and made the stronghold of his sons. For 10,000 years, it had served as a hammer against heresy, a shield against annihilation. But time, treachery, and entropy had gnawed at even the Phalanx's titanic frame. The wars of the Long Vigil had drained its strength. Traitor saboteurs, Xenos infiltrators, and the gradual decay of forgotten systems had left it weakened. During the Black Crusades, it had suffered grievous damage, its internal sanctums violated by warp horrors. By the time of the Great Rift, it was little more than a hollowed carcass adrift above Terra, a monument to glory's fading. The Imperial Fists, stubborn, proud, unyielding, resolved to restore it. But there was a problem. Much of the Phalanx's core technology was lost to time. Its ancient reactors, its reality anchor generators, its psychic shield harmonics. These things had been built by hands that no longer existed. The chapter's tech marines, even those trained by the Adeptus Mechanicus itself, found themselves stymied. They could repair what they understood. They could replace what was common. But the heart of the fortress, its soul, lay dormant, locked behind mysteries too deep for any living mind to grasp. And so, in desperation, an emissary was dispatched to Terra. He came not with demands or petitions, but with humility. A veteran captain bearing the sigils of half a dozen crusades knelt upon the basalt steps of the Imperial Palace and offered the only thing the Fists had left to bargain with: loyalty. Loyalty, and a request. The High Lords refused him. The Mechanicus turned him away. Even the Lord Commander, Robute Guilliman himself, offered only grim silence. But others heard. In the blackest vaults of the Imperial dungeon, the Shadowkeepers listened. They had fought at the Lion's Gate. They had bled for Terra's survival. They knew better than any that symbols mattered, that bastions must stand not merely for defense, but for faith. The Phalanx was not just a weapon, it was a promise, and promises once broken invited doom. Thus, in secret, without ceremony or acknowledgement, the Lockwarden issued a new command. Deep within the dark cells, in vaults so ancient that even their numbering had faded from memory, there existed relics from the dawn of the Imperium. Not weapons, not prisoners, but knowledge. Schematics etched in psycho-reactive crystal, blueprints encoded in stasis-vaulted dreams, instructions for technologies humanity had long since forgotten. One such relic was known simply as the Keystone of Ganymede, a black prism no larger than a man's fist, pulsing with dull, heartbeat light. It contained the harmonic sequences needed to reactivate the phalanx's ancient core, the equations that could awaken the fortress's sleeping soul. Recovering it was not easy. Even the vaults themselves resisted. The passageways twisted, lock wards shifted. Psychic echoes of the old night screamed warnings in dead tongues. 4 Shadow Keepers were lost to unseen forces before the keystone was finally retrieved. When at last it was secured, it was not delivered openly. No parade of honor, no grand declaration. A simple meeting in a silent chamber beneath the palace. An aged tech marine of the fists, his armor battered, his servo harness weeping sacred oils, stood before a figure clad in black. No words were exchanged. The lock warden extended the relic. The tech marine took it with trembling hands. Then the Shadow Keepers turned and vanished into the dark. What followed was one of the Imperium's greatest silent victories. With the keystone in their possession, the tech marines of the Imperial Fists set to work. Guided by the ancient knowledge encoded within, they awoke systems thought forever dead. Null graviton stabilizers hummed back to life. Warp anchor pylons realigned, knitting reality back around the fortress. The phalanx stirred, its engines flexing like a slumbering god roused from uneasy dreams. It was not easy. Sabotage from within, echoes of ancient curses buried in the fortress's heart, erupted as the restoration proceeded. Machine spirits long mad from isolation lashed out, venting atmospheres and firing defensive turrets at repair crews. Hull breaches tore open sections of the bastion. Void-born predators, half-warped into nightmare forms, had to be purged from hidden decks. The Shadow Keepers intervened only once. A singularity anomaly, previously dormant, erupted near the primary command spire. Reality warped, time staggered. Technicians began to dissolve into twisted versions of themselves, screaming warnings from futures that had not yet occurred. A Shadow Keeper strike team, moving through secret maintenance shafts unseen by the mortal crews, descended upon the anomaly. They carried weapons that few outside their order had ever glimpsed. Entropy lances, mind hammers, terminus chains. In a battle fought across the crumbling layers of time itself, they severed the anomaly's anchor, burning it out of existence with cold, merciless precision. No one recorded their presence. No honors were given. When the final conduits flared with light, when the phalanx rose once more in silent defiance of the galaxy's doom, it was the Imperial Fists who stood in glory. They believed themselves alone in their triumph. They were wrong. The Shadow Keepers had labored in silence, as they always had, shaping the course of history from the darkness beneath the throne. And when the fortress finally sailed into the void once more, spearheading new crusades to reclaim the lost Imperium, the black-armored sentinels of Terra simply returned to their vigil. For the Shadow Keepers understood what the galaxy could not. Victory is not always won with banners and songs. Sometimes it is secured by hands unseen, by sacrifices unrecorded, by warriors who know that the light of mankind's future depends not on being remembered, but on enduring. The phalanx had been reborn, and behind its shining walls, in the deepest silences of the void, the chains of vigilance were drawn tighter still. The galaxy remembers Cadia as a martyr, a world that defied the eye of terror until its dying breath, a bastion whose fall broke the dam between sanity and nightmare. Songs are still sung of the Cadians' stubbornness, their sacrifice, but few speak of what was left behind, and fewer still know that Cadia's fall birthed dangers that even death could not erase. For the Shadowkeepers, Cadia was not merely a battlefield, it was a wound, a scar across reality, festering with ancient poisons and forgotten relics too dangerous to leave adrift in the corpse of a world. And so, when Terra regained its breath after the rift's opening, when the first tentative paths through the warp were clawed back by the light of the Astronomicon, a secret order was given. The Lock Warden himself convened the conclave. In the vaults beneath the palace, beneath even the dark cells, the surviving captains of the Shadowkeepers gathered in the Chamber of Iron Oaths. No words were written, no witnesses allowed. Only the binding of silence, the clasping of hands upon chains of blood steel. The mission was clear. They would go to Cadia, they would find what survived, and they would destroy or seal that which should never have tasted freedom. The journey was perilous. Even after the rift stabilized into its bleeding wound across the stars, the paths to Cadia remained treacherous. Warp storms raged unpredictably, the tides of unreality gnawing at every navigator's mind. Lesser vessels were torn apart by psychic tempests or devoured by unseen predators lurking in the shallows of the immaterium. But the Custodes are no mere mortals. The Shadowkeeper's strike cruiser, the Black Edict, was a relic from before the heresy. A ship armored not just in ceramite and void shields, but in psychic wards and rituals woven into its very keel. Its machine spirit, ancient and grim, had carried such warriors across nightmare seas before. It would do so again. They arrived in Cadia's graveyard without fanfare. What they found was a landscape of sorrow. Cadia's surface, once proud, once defiant, had been shattered by the Eye's fury. Continents torn asunder, oceans boiled into mist, the skies bled unnatural colors, and reality itself twisted like a wounded animal. Ruins floated impossibly in low orbit, fragments of the world's shattered crust, drifting like broken teeth around a dying sun. Yet amid the devastation, something stirred. Sensors picked up anomalies immediately, pulses of energy that did not match any known Imperial signatures, psychic echoes too regular to be accidents of the warp. Cadia was dead, but it was not silent. The Shadowkeepers made planetfall upon the remnants of Kasser Vortigern, once a fortress city renowned even among the Cadians for its resilience. Now it was a jagged wound of broken rock and half-melted adamantium, its once proud bastions reduced to skeletal remains. Their presence was like a scalpel cutting into a cancerous mass. Silent, methodical, the black-armored Custodians advanced through the wreckage. Auspex scanners howled warnings, vox feeds glitched into bursts of whispered gibberish. Even here, the Eye of Terror's malice lingered, thick as a miasma. The Shadowkeepers pressed on. They found the first site within hours. It was a vault, half buried under collapsed ferrocrete and twisted steel. Imperial architecture, but older than it should have been, predating the Cadian Gate's final defenses, a relic of earlier, darker preparations. Inside, they found horror, an artifact known only as the Silent Choir, a collection of crystalline obelisks, each humming with barely contained psychic pressure. The choir had been buried beneath Cadia long ago, a weapon against the tides of the warp. But now, damaged and exposed, it was bleeding power into the surrounding wasteland, warping local reality with every passing second. Without hesitation, the Shadowkeepers enacted a purgation protocol. They encircled the site with null field generators, collapsing the choir's psychic lattice inward until the crystals imploded with a soundless roar. The ground itself shuddered. Warp entities that had been feeding on the resonance were shredded into screaming motes of unreality. One horror contained. But it was only the beginning. Deeper into Cadia's ruins they pushed, through void-haunted ravines where gravity shifted without warning, through broken basilicas where prayers were still etched into the walls, untouched by decay yet dripping with blood that never dried. They found remnants of dark covens, survivors who had embraced the warp's gifts, their flesh twisted into obscene parodies of life. These wretches fought with the desperation of the damned, but they were no match for the Custodians. Each engagement was swift, clinical, merciless. The Shadow Keepers took no prisoners. They found a second vault beneath the ruins of Casa Kraf. This one was older still, a relic of the Dark Age, predating the Imperium's first footsteps into the stars. It held a device known to the Shadow Keepers only by a whispered code name, the Midnight Engine. Records of the engine were fragmentary, even in the secret annals of the Dark Cells. A machine capable of anchoring a planet against the tides of the warp, or, if corrupted, inverting that anchor to drag entire star systems into unreality. The Midnight Engine was damaged, bleeding reality-warping pulses into the surrounding wasteland. Strange growths, trees of living bone, rivers of mercury blood sprouted in its wake. The Shadow Keepers acted swiftly. They could not remove it. Instead, they buried it anew. Employing demolition charges infused with anti-psychic inhibitors, they collapsed the vault's structure, sealing the engine beneath layers of warp-inert material and carving warning sigils into the very bedrock. Not destroyed, but entombed. The alternative was unthinkable. Their final discovery came at a price. Beneath the remnants of Cadia's primary astropathic spire, they found a locus point, a fracture in reality where the warp bled into real space freely. The fracture pulsed like a living wound, drawing demonic entities toward it like moths to flame. The Custodians fought their way through the infestation. There, at the heart of the wound, they found a shard, a fragment of an ancient weapon, a relic so old that it predated even the Age of Strife. It pulsed with malevolent intelligence, its surface shifting with geometries not meant for mortal comprehension. It was trying to repair itself. Had it succeeded, Cadia's corpse would have become a beacon, a permanent gateway for the warp to vomit forth its horrors directly into real space. They could not allow it. The battle was brutal. Reality itself fought them. Walls bled, gravity shifted, time stuttered and lurched. Custodians fell, mighty warriors brought low by entities that should not exist. But the shard was destroyed. The wound bled out into nothingness. Cadia's corpse fell silent once more. When the mission was complete, the Shadow Keepers did not linger. They left no markers, no monuments, no trace of their passage. Cadia had fallen. But the infection had been excised. Another quiet victory. Another chain reforged. The galaxy would never know. But for the Shadow Keepers, knowledge was never the reward. Only the silence that followed. The silence that meant the work had been done. There are wars fought with banners raised high, with proclamations of righteousness and legions marching to victory. And then there are wars fought in silence, against enemies so vile that their names are forbidden, their existence denied. It is in this latter war that the Shadow Keepers now find their truest calling. For in the broken galaxy left in the wake of the Great Rift, it is not only diamonds that haunt the Imperium's dying light, it is Xenos relics, ancient and new, waking in the void. It is remnants of long-dead civilizations, stirring in the corpse dust of lost worlds. It is things that humanity was never meant to see, and yet now must confront. And when these abominations crawl into the stars once more, it is the Shadow Keepers who are sent to hunt them down. One such hunt began in the shattered remains of Darcis Prime. The world had been a quiet frontier colony once, forgotten by the wider Imperium. But when the rift opened, when the stars wept and screamed, something answered the call from beyond. When Imperial forces re-established contact, they found only ruins. Cities melted into glassy craters, mountains reshaped into impossible spirals, survivors speaking in tongues no human mouth should form. The Mechanicus called for quarantine. The Inquisition debated exterminatus. But before either could act, the Shadow Keepers arrived. Their black assault craft fell like meteors into the cursed landscape. No announcements were made, no identification codes transmitted. Their presence was authority enough. They moved swiftly through the ruins, Auspex scanners set to detect anomalies no standard device could even perceive. They traced the infection to its source, a monolith buried beneath the colony's capital. It was Xenos in origin, but not Necron, nor any known alien race. A structure of translucent material, shifting colors across spectrums human eyes were not built to see. Pulsing with psychic emissions that gnawed at the mind like unseen teeth. Around it, reality twisted. Echoes of long-dead colonists played out in endless degrading loops. Scenes of normal life, corrupted by growing wrongness until even the laws of causality bled away. The monolith was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a seed, a tendril of another reality, planted within human space, preparing to bloom into something infinitely worse. The Shadow Keepers did not hesitate. They deployed terminus charges, relic devices that unraveled space itself, at key points around the monolith's base. As the devices activated, a keening wail rose that could be heard across the void. The monolith shimmered, cracked, and imploded inward, taking the infection with it. The colony was left a dead world, sterilized by necessity. Another unseen victory. But Xenos abominations were not the only threats they faced. In the abyssal reaches of the warp-scattered Imperium Nihilus, another terror awaited. A remnant of the Tyrannid hive fleets, twisted beyond even their own alien nature. It began with the silent death of a dozen worlds, planets stripped of life, not just of biomass, but of memory, of presence. Entire histories erased, as if they had never existed. The Magos biologists theorized it was a splinter of Hive Fleet Ouroboros, mutated by exposure to the cicatrix, a tendril of consuming thought that sought not merely to devour, but to unmake. The Shadow Keepers were dispatched. Tracking the beast through broken systems and dying stars, they finally cornered it above the derelict world of Nihal's grave. It was not a hive fleet in the traditional sense. No living ships, no swarms, only a single entity, a vast, serpentine horror, its chitin laced with veins of pure void, its psychic signature an endless hunger that gnawed at the fabric of reality itself. The battle was unlike any fought by man. The Shadow Keepers deployed boarding pods directly onto the creature's hide, drilling into its flesh with seismic harpoons. Clad in void-hardened armor, they cut their way through layers of necrotic tissue and chittering nightmare, planting cyclonic charges in its vitals. The creature fought back, not with weapons, but with dreams. Each custodian was assailed by visions of failure, despair, and forgotten sins. Some faltered, most endured. In the end, the charges detonated in a synchronized cascade, rupturing the beast from within. The void screamed as the creature died. Another unseen nightmare consigned to oblivion. Yet, not all threats were so easily destroyed. On the cold world of Ventris Secundus, the Shadow Keepers encountered an artifact beyond mortal understanding. A device crafted by the Inari, the death cult of the Eldar, intended to tether souls to machinery in defiance of she who thirsts. But something had gone wrong. The artifact, corrupted by warp exposure, no longer saved souls. It devoured them. When the Custodians arrived, they found an entire PDF garrison standing silently in their bunkers, armor polished, weapons ready, but utterly hollow. Their bodies moved, their eyes blinked, but their souls were gone, consumed to feed a growing singularity of thought. The artifact pulsed at the heart of the base, a beacon for further corruption. Destroying it required subtlety. Blunt force would only scatter its infection across the sector. The Custodians worked quickly, sealing the installation in null barriers and deploying an ancient rite, the Rite of Sundering, a forgotten technique designed to sever a warp-tainted machine from its parasitic consciousness. It succeeded. Barely. The artifact imploded, dragging the stolen souls with it. The base was left a hollow shell. No trace of the garrison remained. Another small mercy in a galaxy where mercy was rarer than hope. These are but a few of the silent wars the Shadowkeepers now fight. Across the broken Imperium, they hunt horrors spawned by alien arrogance, by demonic malice, by ancient mistakes awakening anew. They do not ask for thanks. They do not expect songs of triumph. For each threat they destroy, a dozen more stir in the dark. They know they are losing, slowly, inevitably. That entropy gnaws at the chains of order faster than they can forge them anew. But still they fight, still they endure, still they hunt, for the enemies of mankind are legion. But the Shadowkeepers are the blade in the dark, the silent storm that scours the rot before it can take root. They are the jailers of the past, the hunters of the future, and they will not rest, not while even a single alien horror breathes, not while even a single demonic whisper echoes in the dark, not while terror still endures beneath the broken sky. The Shadowkeepers are not merely warriors. They are a fortress of minds and wills, a bulwark standing against horrors that would unmake the Imperium from within. But even among these guardians, one figure stands apart, colder than stone, harder than void iron, more relentless than death itself. The Lock Warden. The title is not granted. It is earned, forged in the crucible of duty where even Custodians hesitate to tread. To be Lock Warden is to be the keeper of the final keys, the last voice in the deepest dark. It is to command without mercy, without pity, without room for error. It is to stand not only against the galaxy's enemies, but against one's own brothers, should their resolve ever waver. For in the dark cells, loyalty is not enough. Vigilance must be absolute, and when it falters, it is the Lock Warden who acts. The current Lock Warden, Borsa Thirsk, is a figure more legend than man among the Custodes. Even among a brotherhood of demigods, Thirsk's presence carries an unnatural gravity. Towering in his baroque black armor, each plate etched with sigils of binding and silent judgment, he moves with a quiet certainty that freezes even the boldest hearts. Those who meet his gaze, rare as that is, speak of an ancient weight behind his golden eyes, a burden older than the current age of mankind. It is said that Thirsk has not laughed, nor smiled, nor slept without armor since before the opening of the Great Rift. Such things are not choices for the Lock Warden. They are necessities. Thirsk's path to the mantle was no ordinary ascent. Long before the galaxy knew the words Cicatrix Maledictum, he served among the standard shield companies of the Custodes. In the outermost courts of Terra, he was a reaper of heretics and warp cults, a sword drawn only when diplomacy and intimidation failed. But it was his actions during the Anathema Rebellion, an event buried in secrecy even within Imperial records, that drew the gaze of the Shadowkeepers. During that hidden war, a segment of Terra's own spire cults fell to the worship of an entity known only as the Morning Star, a being neither fully daemon nor machine. It whispered through logic engines, corrupted flesh through circuit, and bent entire noble houses to its will. When standard Custodes operations faltered, when the rebellion threatened the very understructure of the palace itself, it was Thirsk who volunteered to walk alone into the heart of the infection. He emerged a month later, alone, soaked in blood and oil, carrying the shattered core of the Morning Star in his hands. He said nothing. He demanded no recognition. He simply returned to duty, his armor permanently darkened by the energies he had endured. The Shadow Keepers approached him shortly after. Becoming Lockwarden is not a matter of appointment. It is ordeal. Thirsk underwent the trials of binding, a series of psychic, physical, and existential tests that have broken even the greatest heroes of the Custodes. He was locked alone in the vault of unspoken chains for a full Terran year, armed with nothing but his mind. The vault is a place where even light dies, where time frays into broken loops, and where the prisoners whisper through the walls in voices designed to destroy faith. When the vault was opened again, Thirsk stood unbowed. His spear was shattered, his armor was cracked. His soul, however, remained untouched, burnished into something harder and colder than before. Only then was the title of Lockwarden bestowed upon him. Only then was the full authority of the Dark Cells placed into his hands. The Lockwarden's word is law among the Shadow Keepers. He alone holds the Master Key, a psychic sigil burned into his flesh, allowing access to the innermost cells where the greatest threats lie. No High Lord can command him. No Inquisitor may overrule him. Even the Captain General of the Custodes treats the Lockwarden's council with wary respect. For the Lockwarden is the final line. If a Dark Cell prisoner breaks free, if an artifact threatens to breach containment, it is the Lockwarden who decides whether to attempt reclamation or to enact Protocol Terminus, the complete destruction of entire sectors of the vaults, sacrificing brothers, relics, and secrets alike to prevent a greater catastrophe. Thirsk has enacted Protocol Terminus 3 times. Each time it cost the lives of dozens of Custodians. Each time he stood silent among the ashes, unflinching, unrepentant. But command is not merely about judgment. It is about vigilance without pause. Thirsk knows every prisoner by designation and history. He studies every artifact sealed within the vaults. He trains endlessly with his brothers, testing them for signs of corruption, hesitation, or exhaustion. Those who falter are relieved without ceremony, sometimes reassigned, sometimes quietly removed. The Lockwarden cannot afford sentiment. He must be colder than the horrors he guards. There are tales among the Shadow Keepers, whispered with a mixture of awe and dread, of Thirsk's encounters with the prisoners themselves, of the day he stood before the gate of the Amaranth Coil, a relic capable of fracturing willpower across thousands of miles, and stared into its mind-shattering geometry without blinking, of the time he fought the Echoed Apostle, a demonic remnant of an ancient war master, in the lowest cells, binding it back into containment after a breach, with nothing but a ritual blade and the weight of his own soul. Of how, once every decade, he walks alone into Vault 79, the heart of silent wounds, to renew its failing wards with his own life force, each ritual leaving him slower, older, closer to the end, yet still unbroken. The Lockwarden carries no laurels. He speaks no boasts. Even his brothers among the Custodes often find him unsettling, a reminder that loyalty and service demand more than valor. They demand absolute, unsparing sacrifice. Thirsk does not care. He does not need to be loved. He needs only to endure. For as long as he draws breath, the chains of the Dark Cells will not break. For as long as he commands, the prisoners will not walk free. And when the day comes that the vaults fail, when the darkness rises, it will be Borsa Thirsk, the Lockwarden, who will stand last, silent, alone, unyielding. Beneath the golden glory of the Imperial Palace, deeper even than the molten arteries of ancient Terra, the Shadow Keepers endure. Their steps echo across forgotten stone. Their breaths mist the frigid, lifeless air. They stand where time has no dominion, where day and night are meaningless, and where no mortal witness will ever come. They stand in silence. The silent vigil is not a duty undertaken for a year, a decade, or even a century. It is a sentence unto eternity, a sacrifice so complete that even memory fades under its weight. To be a shadow keeper is to accept a life without accolades, a death without remembrance, a purpose without end. Within the dark cells there is no sun, no bells toll the hour, no celebrations mark the passing of years, only the faint thrum of the vault's soul-enduring wards, the muted hum of null reactors, and the soft rasp of armored feet upon dustless floors. Each Shadow Keeper lives by rhythms older than the Imperium itself. Every cycle, not measured by clocks but by tradition, begins with the rite of waking iron. Each Custodian stands alone in his assigned sector, armored and weaponed, facing the sealed gates. In absolute silence, he traces the sigils of vigilance across his chest, reaffirming his soul's bond to the Emperor's will. Not a word is spoken, not a prayer uttered. In the dark cells, words are dangerous. Their patrols are endless and without variance. Every corridor, every antechamber, every vault door is inspected meticulously. Wards are checked. Psychic containment fields are re-energized. Microfractures in stone and steel are noted and sealed. Even a hairline crack left untended could become a breach. And through even the smallest flaw, the horrors sealed within could claw their way free. No detail is too small, no task too minor. For here, negligence is death not only for the Custodian, but for Terra itself. The armor of the Shadow Keepers is a reflection of their purpose. Unlike the resplendent gold of their brethren above, their plate is a deep black, a void into which light itself seems to retreat. Their capes are the color of dried blood, their crests subdued, their helms featureless save for the burning red of optical sensors. Each plate is etched with the names of the vaults they have served, the prisoners they have contained, the breaches they have survived. Some Shadow Keeper's armor carries marks so dense with sigils that almost no original surface remains. To wear such armor is not a badge of honor. It is a shroud. It is a declaration that they have accepted burdens no mortal mind could bear and remain standing. Communication among the Shadow Keepers during their vigil is sparse. Hand signals, coded flashes of auspex beams, occasionally brief, clipped transmissions over encrypted vox links. Voices are reserved for emergencies, and even then only the minimum necessary to convey lethal information. Silence is more than tradition. It is armor. The vaults themselves are steeped in psychic noise, the residual echoes of the imprisoned terrors. The more sound, the more speech, the greater the chance of awakening something slumbering within the stones. Thus, silence is survival. Thus, silence is respect. Thus, silence is sacred. Over centuries, even Custodians are changed by the vigil. They become colder, more detached, not through loss of faith, but through the shedding of all things unnecessary. Friendships fray and dissolve. Ambitions die quiet deaths. Only duty remains. Among the Shadow Keepers, individuality is a whisper, not a shout. They move in perfect synchronicity. They fight without needing to see one another. They react to danger with a unified purpose that borders on the preternatural. In the deep, in the endless dark, such unity is the only path to survival. And yet, they are not mindless automatons. Each Shadow Keeper bears a soul honed to razor sharpness, a mind fortified against temptations, a spirit hardened against despair. They do not simply stand watch, they embody it. The perils of the silent vigil are not always obvious. Sometimes a vault grows restless. Sometimes a prisoner stirs without reason, sending ripples through the psychic lattice. Wards flicker. Nightmares creep into the periphery of thought. The very stones whisper treason. In those moments, the vigil tightens. Custodians rotate in triple shifts. Additional wards are layered like armor across every seam. Sacrifices are made, ancient relics consigned to destruction to reinforce containment. Every breath becomes an act of defiance against the gathering dark. When containment protocols escalate to the highest levels, the Lockwarden himself may walk the halls. His passage is like the movement of a glacier, slow, implacable, undeniable. Where he walks, breaches cease. Where he stands, the vaults grow silent once more. His presence alone is sometimes enough to drive the restless prisoners back into torpor. Sometimes, but not always. There are occasional ceremonies, sparse, grim, necessary. Every 100 cycles, the Oath of Chains is renewed. The Shadow Keepers gather in the Vault of the Silent Flame, a massive chamber deep beneath the lowest cells. A single torch burns at its center, fed by incense harvested from the black shrines of Terra, its smoke thick with psychic wards. Each custodian steps forward in turn, placing a hand upon the unseen chain, a relic forged from the bindings that once held the first prisoners of the dark cells. Each recites the binding oath, by will unbroken, by vigil unfaltering, by silence unending, I hold the chains. No more, no less. Afterward, they disperse without ceremony. No feasts, no songs, only the tightening of armor straps, the sharpening of blades, the checking of containment seals. And the vigil resumes. The galaxy has forgotten them. Even within the Custodes, many speak of the Shadow Keepers as relics of a bygone era. Unnecessary now that Guilliman's Indomitus crusade spreads the Emperor's light once more. They are wrong. In the vaults, the prisoners wait. They hunger, they dream, they probe the chains, seeking weakness. The galaxy may fight its wars, it may crown new champions, it may fall and rise and fall again. But beneath it all, the silent vigil endures. There is no ending for the Shadow Keepers, no glorious last stand, no final battle to be sung in the annals of man. There is only the next hour, the next patrol, the next breath, taken in silence, guarded in darkness, for as long as Terra endures, for as long as the throne flickers with the last light of the Emperor's will. There will be those who stand unseen in the deep, those who bind the horrors of the past, those who shield the fragile hope of the future. The silent vigil endures, and so too do the unseen sentinels who guard mankind's final dawn. The Imperium staggers into a future paved in blood and ash. The banners of the Space Marines still fly. The sermons of the Ecclesiarchy still echo across the stars. The engines of the Adeptus Mechanicus still churn and spark. Yet all of it, all the glories, all the might, all the unyielding declarations of eternal dominion, falter before the simple, grinding reality of the galaxy's death. Worlds burn, systems vanish into the warp, empires fall silent, consumed by horrors from without and within. Even Terra, the throne world, the cradle of mankind, feels the cold breath of entropy gnawing at its bones. And beneath it all, deeper than the tombs of forgotten heroes, deeper than the sins of ancient kings, the Shadow Keepers endure. They do not endure through strength of arms alone. They endure because they must. Because the alternative is unthinkable. There is a truth few will ever know. That for all the wars fought in the Emperor's name, for all the blood spilled in his honor, the greatest threat to humanity does not march beneath banners or shout in defiance. It whispers, it waits, it dreams, and it is the Shadow Keepers who stand between those dreams and reality. They are the anchors. They are the chains. They are the last guardians of an Imperium already cracking at the seams. In the wake of the Great Rift's birth, the silent wars have only grown worse. More vaults have fallen silent, not breached, simply silenced. Cells where ancient horrors once stirred in uneasy slumber now echo with nothing at all. Not death, not victory. Something else. Something unknowable. Entire levels of the dark cells have been sealed permanently, bricked over with adamantine, their entrances warded with rites so potent that even custodians fear to linger near them. What lies within is a question no one dares answer. Outside the vaults, the Imperium reorders itself again and again. New crusades are launched, new threats arise, new glories are proclaimed. The galaxy spins on, wounded, defiant, blind. But the Shadowkeepers do not change. While others rebuild, they dig deeper. While others rally to banners, they fall further into silence. While others dream of victory, they prepare for the moment when dreams end and nightmares reign. The Lock Warden, Borsa Thirsk, remains at his post, though the passing decades have etched new scars into his armor and into his soul. Each year seems to weigh heavier upon him. Each cycle of the vigil drains another fragment of what little humanity yet lingers behind his stern gaze. But still he endures, still he commands. He is not alone. New custodians are inducted into the Shadowkeepers with grim ceremony. Warriors drawn from the broader shield companies, tempered by battle across the broken stars, then stripped of all titles, all honors, all history. In the vaults there is no hero, only the watch, only the duty. The nature of the threats they face has evolved as well. Once it was enough to contain the monstrous relics of the Dark Age. Now entire concepts bleed into the vaults. Ideas so twisted, so antithetical to reality, that they must be bound and buried alongside flesh and steel. Mimetic weapons, cursed songs, self-propagating lies that unravel thought and reason like rotten cloth. The Shadowkeepers fight these unseen enemies with measures known only to them. Psycho-reactive helms that suppress not just voice, but thought itself. Sigil masks that erase memory at a command word. Relics of impossible technology used not for conquest, but for survival. They adapt because they must. Beyond Terra, the galaxy fractures further. Entire sectors fall silent. Warp storms consume the stars. The armies of chaos grow stronger, not weaker. The Xenos empires of old stir once more, sensing the end of mankind's dominion. And yet, still, the Shadowkeepers endure. Not for victory. Victory is a lie whispered to the dying. They endure for survival. They endure because even if Terra falls, even if the stars die, even if the last human voice is silenced beneath a crimson sky, some things must never walk free. There are some among the Inquisition who have guessed at the existence of the Shadowkeepers, whispers of black-armored custodians who move without banners, who execute entire inquisitorial retinues without explanation, who vanish into the blackness of the vaults without leaving a trace. Few have dared to investigate. Fewer still have survived the knowledge. For the Shadowkeepers are not an arm of policy. They are not a tool of imperial law. They are the prison wardens of sins too vast for the human mind to comprehend. Their chains do not bend for politics. Their silence cannot be bargained with. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the Terran night, when the stars beyond the palace are hidden behind storms of warp-born flame, the few who know of the vault's true nature wonder. What happens when even the Shadowkeepers fail? What happens when the silent vigil ends? Will the prisoners rise? Will Terra itself become a beacon of corruption, a second eye of terror tearing the heart of the galaxy asunder? Or will it be quieter still? A simple flicker of light snuffed out in an instant, leaving only the endless dark. Even the Shadowkeepers do not know. They do not ask. They do not hope. They endure. They are the last silence, the last shadow, the last shield that humanity will never see. And so long as one Shadowkeeper draws breath, so long as one Guardian stands alone before the abyss, The dark cells will hold. The horrors will remain chained. The secrets will remain buried. The Imperium will endure, not through strength nor glory, but through the silent, unseen sacrifices of those who expect nothing in return. The future is ashes. The stars are dying. The dreams of mankind are bleeding into nightmare. But the shadow endures, and in that endurance there is hope, silent, unseen, unbroken.